Howdy, folks. So I've got my week 5 questions. Only had two of them. One from bioenergetics and one's from Phys. One was asking about how much creatine should you take. The dosage, from what I've been able to look at, briefly looking through the literature, is usually ends up being about 0.03 grams per kilogram of body mass per day as kind of a maintenance. Now, obviously, some folks are going to respond a bit better. You usually hear recommendations like 5 grams. Some of them will say 3 grams if you weigh less than 120 pounds, and then it will be something more like 5 grams from that weight until 200 pounds, and over 200 pounds it's like 8 grams. You also have some folks that are high responders and low responders. At the end of the day, I would start with probably a dosage of 3 to 5 grams a day and just do that consistently. See if you have increases in water retention in your muscles so they look bigger, a little bit better performance, a little bit better anaerobic endurance. And then once you kind of hit a stride there where you feel like you're topped off, you just hang out there. Bigger people are going to require greater dosage. So that's why we want to think of it relative to body mass. Loading creatine is not really worth it just because of the fact that when you load creatine, you have to take in much greater dosages acutely. I'm not worried about that from a health perspective. I'm just cheap. So the thing is, if you load creatine, you'll max out those muscle stores of creatine in about a week. If you don't load creatine, instead you take that, the lower, sustainable dose, you'll peak out your muscle creatine levels in probably about a month. So you either max out its availability in 1 week, or you hit that same max just 3 weeks later, and you haven't gone through as much creatine. So if you load creatine, you do 20 grams a day for 7 days, it's 140 grams of creatine. Okay, and then after that, let's say you just do a maintenance dose of 5 grams for the rest of that month. So we've got, 1 week, 140 grams, and then we've got the next 21 days done at 5, so that's 105. 140 plus 105 gives us, we've had to go through effectively 245 grams of creatine. Cool. Now, if instead you just do 5 grams a day for all 28 days and you get to the same level of saturation, you have only ingested 140 grams. You've saved yourself, let's see here, over 105 grams of creatine you didn't have to ingest. And so your supplement's going to go further, and it's going to effectively save you money. And so that's something I can get behind. Question from bioenergetics, which is kind of an interesting two-parter, which is, are we going to have a lower thermic effect of food because we're eating a high-fiber diet? That's a good question. It is being fermented by the bacteria in the GI. We're still going to have some, turnover there, so to speak, of getting short-chain fatty acids from it. So most of your thermic effect food is coming from digestion of protein. Not that fats and carbs aren't contributing, but they're not really doing that much. And you're still getting some calories from that fiber, specifically more the soluble kind. And so the insoluble, you've got certain parts you just can't break down whatsoever, but you get the fermentation and potentially getting some positive effects from that. The number here is going to be focusing on minutia. So we should consistently get in enough fiber in our diet, but we shouldn't over obsess about how that's affecting our caloric balance. Instead, we should just focus on just our general tracking of our macronutrients. And depending on response, and especially when we're consistent with our diet, our recording, our exercise, and we can see how we have that response of weight change or weight stability, we then should get a bit more granular if we're not getting the results that we want, and or we're getting the results we want, but we're concerned potentially with the pacing of those results. Are they coming on too fast, too slow? And then from there, we can go ahead and make a value judgment as to, okay, is it really worth really being that finicky about the source of each of our nutrients? Because just like we talked about, yes, it's on average, you get a little over 4 grams of, or 4 calories, 4 kcals per gram in carbohydrates. And obviously, protein's a little bit higher, but different amino acids, different carbohydrates actually have slightly higher and slightly lower yield. Same thing with fatty acids. So that's why we work with those averages. Start there, work with kind of the big rocks, and then we can work into more of some of those small rocks as we go. So thanks for listening, guys. Have a great day. All right, folks, one question we have for review that is actually pretty useful is effectively, what's the best method? Now, best method is a way that is, well, is it best based on your finances? Is it best based on scientifically speaking? Is it best based on convenience?
scientifically, direct calorimetry, putting somebody in the room, figuring out really how many calories. So they're effectively living in a prison cell that's measuring everything. Really accurate. Pretty expensive. Going to be pretty hard to get access to that equipment unless you got one heck of a budget. Whereas wearing, let's say, most convenient, this could be just wearing an activity tracker and then seeing how things are going on. It's definitely going to be inaccurate, but it's going to give us trending, and based upon the trending, we can start to figure out where we should go from there. As well as far as most or least expensive, we could just write down our physical activity. Most phones have accelerometers in them now, so you can just kind of use that as a tracker. Once again, not going to be as accurate, but it's still giving us ideas. So each of them have their own utility. Indirect is nice because we can also look a little bit at, which fuel source effectively are we using preferentially a bit, as well as we can look at ventilatory rates and a couple other changes. And then accelerometers, heart rate trackers. Heart rates can sometimes be elevated just because we're stressed. It's not actually because we're burning more calories. So we can have some false positives for calorie burn. But altogether, it's still going to give you good information. And the key is, as long as you're doing a method consistently for long periods of time, you're going to naturally build a correction factor, because it's never going to be perfect. We can just try to find something that's going to be a little bit more accurate. So, good question. Hope this kind of answered your query. Stay safe out there. Have a great day.